the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Saturday, May 25th. We have our AMA, and we've got a big group of people here participating today live. This is going to be fun. This is how it usually goes. We go through the people who are here live on video. More people are joining, so it's a nice group. We'll take questions from them. If there are any super chat questions, we'll take them. And we'll do that. We'll see how many times. Given the big group, it won't be many times, but we'll see how it all works. All right, let's see. I'm going to shift this to speaker mode. And all right, let's start. So hopefully everybody is on video right now, has prepared a question. If not, that's fine too. If you just want to hang out, that's okay. But I will start going around, and I'm going to start with John. Hey, John.
Hi, Yaron. Thanks for all that you do. It's fabulous.
Appreciate that.
I once heard Leonard Peikoff speak about 12-step recovery programs. I'm one of those that recovering alcoholic drug abuser, and I heard Leonard speak about people taking care of themselves, real individual thing, and I got a lot from that. I've never been able to. I try to connect with people who are in recovery, who are also objectivists. And I've got one friend and one or two others that I've met along the way. My question is, do you recall anything that Leonard said regarding 12-step recovery, anything along those lines that you might recall?
I mean, I vaguely recall him talking about it, and that mentioning that if you look at the steps, most of them are about taking responsibility for your own life, taking your life seriously, and kind of making that, habituating that, making that a habit. I think there is a kind of a religious element that I think he mentioned that a lot of these 12-step programs have, but that you can abstract that away, I think, and focus in on the kind of self-help aspects of it, on the self-interested aspects of it, and ignore kind of the mystical overlay that exists there. But I don't recall much more, so I don't recall the details of what he actually said. And I'm not familiar myself with the details of the 12-step programs.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Sean.
You're on. Didn't Rand love the...
Yep. Andrew, you there?
Hi. Yeah, you muted me. Didn't Ein really love like that serenity line that they got from AA? Remember, like, serenity to change the things I can and to accept the things I can't. And I think that was from AA.
It might be from AA. I don't know, but yes, that's a good line. I mean, that is a line that basically says, and I use that, and I talked about that when I did the Rules for Life. One of the things you have to realize in life is what do you have control over and what don't you have control over, and don't spend a lot of time and don't spend a lot of your energy and don't spend a lot of resources on those things you have no control over. Focus on what you can control, and I use that a lot to tell people to, just lay a little lower on the politics, because you can't control it. Focus on your own life. Focus on the things in your environment that you can actually make better, and invest in those. All right, Adam. You're muted, Adam. Muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, my question is about the impression of general incompetence that many people around the world see in the Israeli government. Like all the competent people go to profit-making private businesses, and the only ones who stay in government advance not on the basis of merit, but on the basis of political connections. And so the people entering government service might sometimes be competent, but they are not promoted and they leave. And recently, the Israeli ambassador to Poland has been making really a lot of nonsensical noise that everybody in Poland is making fun of. And I looked him up, and he's the president of the Diplomats Union. The diplomats have a union, and so he had to be advanced to ambassador, even though he's not competent. To what extent do you think this is a real problem?
Well, I mean, I definitely think it's a real problem. I mean, look at the election we're going to have in the United States for president. We've got two moronic, old guys who can barely put a sentence together. So, it's obviously politics is a system that does not necessarily promote and encourage intelligence or strategic thinking or anything like that. Diplomatic service in the United States is based on political contributions. So to become an ambassador in the United States, if you give the winner enough money, then they'll appoint you as an ambassador somewhere, if that's what you would like, if you would like that. Some lifetime, bureaucrats, people within the State Department or politicians. In Israel, I think most of the ambassador appointments are based on people within the civil servants and based on lifetime civil servant. Most of them are probably not very impressive. Although, I have to say that the Israeli ambassador at the U.S. and the UN, I don't know them right now, but in the past, have struck me as super articulate and quite impressive in interviews and things like that. So I'm not sure you can universalize. Also, Israeli politics is a little different in that Israeli politics is dominated by generals, by people in the army who then shift to politics when they retire from the army. So there are a lot of very senior officials. So I'm very critical of all of them, both as generals and as politicians. But they're not imbeciles, and they're not they're people who can actually talk and string sentences together. But I don't know that anywhere in the world we have politicians who are impressive. I don't know any politician out there. I've never met a politician, particularly an elected politician, who I was impressed by, right? And I've met a lot who I said, wow, okay, there's somebody that's impressive. That's a smart person. I'd like to hang out with them.
That's amazing.
Always strike me as pretty mediocre and to some extent pretty dumb and interested in all the wrong things. So I don't think Israel's unique. The diplomatic corps in Israel has a particularly hard job to do because Israel's constantly under attack. I did get to know personally the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, I don't know, about 10 years ago. He is now the Israeli ambassador to Germany. And we hit it off. We had a great time. I sent him my books. He read some of my books. He read my articles about Israel and about just war theory and stuff like that, and claimed to agree with them. So I think it's a mixed bag. I think you get all kinds, and some of them are better and some of them are worse than others. But I really don't. I've never seen anybody. Again, I've never met anybody who was super smart. I mean, Andrew says Paul Ryan seemed smart. Maybe. I mean, maybe. I think he was. But problem with Paul Ryan, he's a coward. So you might be smart, but then he's a coward. So you've got this combination of smart is one thing, but then moral character is another. And Ryan didn't have a very strong character. So yeah, I don't think Israel's unique. I think they're probably a little bit better only because so many of them have gone through kind of senior positions in the military. Although my experience with the military is the same, both American military and Israeli military, is that people who stay in the military and attain leadership positions in the military are often people who are just too afraid to go into the private sector and get a real job. And the military is coddling and safe and very predictable and easy. And as long as you don't rattle the boat, you're going to do fine. At least that was my experience of my senior officers in my unit in military intelligence in the Israeli army a long time ago. And I doubt that has changed.
A question about military intelligence. How come Israel didn't have a working plan to flood the Hamas tunnels in Gaza?
I don't know. I think they probably did, but I'm not sure that the flooding of the tunnels is working. They tried to flood the tunnels early on in the war, and I don't think it's working. I think the problem is that there's something about the way the tunnels are constructed. It could be there's a lot of sand and there's a lot of leakages into the sand. The reality is that the flooding of the tunnels, which they tried to do early on, has now become a dominant strategy because I don't think it's worked. But Israel has a special unit. It's a special forces unit. The only job is this unit, and it's been training for years. The only job of this unit is to figure out how to destroy tunnels. And they have tried different techniques, including flooding. And some have been more successful, some have been less successful. But it's not that they weren't prepared. They were prepared. And again, they had this special unit that its only job was to prepare for war in Gaza and to figure out how to deal with tunnels. The challenge they're having is discovering the tunnels. There are so many of them, and there are so many branches of them that they just haven't discovered a lot of them. And I think their main concern is destroying them without knowing what's inside. They might be hostages. On the other hand, going inside to discover what's inside is very, very risky for the soldiers who have to do it. That's where it would be good if you had robots send them into the tunnels, just because tunnel warfare is just so risky, and all the tunnels are booby trapped, and it's urban warfare is really, really hard, and then tunnel warfare is one step more than that. But the flooding they tried, it was not successful. I'm not exactly sure why. I haven't seen anybody really writing extensively about it. They probably don't want to release that kind of information. Israel's probably protecting that as intelligence.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
I
Adam.
have a couple of more questions, but
get to
I
them.
see there are many of us. So,
All right, Darius, it's good to see you. It's been a while.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Good to see you too.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm looking forward to saying hi at OCON, Yaron.
Oh, good. I'm
Coming
glad
up.
you came.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So I'm hearing a narrative that's, I think it's starting to emerge. I think it's starting to emerge quickly. And I want to know if you're hearing it and how you would respond to it. I'm hearing it from friends and loved ones here in Los Angeles who are sort of who consider themselves left of center, even if just moderately. And and it goes like this. We accept Israel's moral right to to do most of what it's doing in the war and defend itself and go after Hamas. But it's Netanyahu who is the problem. We just don't trust him. We hate him so much. We hate his politics. And he's the main reason why so much of the world is against Israel, not because of all the other things like anti-Semitism. And kind of giving themselves an excuse to actually be against Israel because of how much they dislike Netanyahu. And I know you've talked poorly about Netanyahu many times in the past, but for different reasons than they did.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a convenient scapegoat. I don't think that it's anything more than that. And unfortunately, because of Israeli internal politics, it gives it some legitimacy. A lot of Israelis don't like Netanyahu. There are demonstrations pretty much every day in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv demanding that he resign. And look, he has still not said that he would resign because of October 7th. He has still not taken any responsibility for what has happened, which is pretty spooky and pretty pathetic for a politician. But for them, I think it's not about anything other than he represents, he represents toughness, because they don't know, like I know, that he's really a wimp. They think he's tough. And so for them, it represents actually Israeli toughness, Israeli willingness to stand up for themselves, Israel's willingness to actually execute on the war, to do what is necessary. And so they hate him for his virtues, even though I don't think they're real, but that's what they hate him for. And that is pathetic. That's sad. But it's an easy way for them to deflect, because the reality is, in terms of what's actually going on in Gaza, the opposition in Israel agrees. There's nobody in Israel saying, the military operation is wrong. We shouldn't go to Rafah. We shouldn't do this. We shouldn't do that. There's nothing. I mean, some people would like more negotiations, but even that, you hear Yair Lapid, who is the main opposition leader right now, he's like as tough as Netanyahu when he speaks on Hamas. But from the outside, instead of American liberals, leftists saying, no, we don't like what's going on in Gaza, let's just, they'll just blame Netanyahu, make him a scapegoat for what's going on. But I agree with you. It really is. They really don't like Israel defending itself. They really don't like what's going on in Gaza, and it's just convenient this way to rationalize in their own mind. No, I'm for Israel's self-defense. Let me just blame Netanyahu for everything, and there's a sense in which it's a little bit like that within Israel. It's not just here. Even in Israel, I think part of some of the people in Israel have the same attitude.
But Yaron, isn't that just very common in all our approach in Western countries? I mean, it's always just, get rid of Saddam, everything will be fine. Get rid of Putin, everything will be fine. It's always like that. I find that.
I think that's right. I think it's a superficial understanding of what is actually going on. It's a rejection of the importance of culture and importance of ideas. It's a focus. It's a sole focus on kind of the individual, the political leadership. It gives our politicians a lot more power. It assumes they have a lot more power and a lot more significance and a lot more influence, and they really do. They really don't have that much power, influence, and significance. I agree with you. I agree, Amlan. It is a cultural white phenomena. It's particularly true in times when things are going bad. I mean, look. I don't know. We have this tendency in the U.S. all the time, right? The economy's doing well. Oh, it must be Trump's fault. Trump, everything he's doing must be causing the economy to do well, or Bill Clinton, or whoever it was, right? Or there's inflation and the economy's not doing well, so it must be Biden's fault. So we have this very short-term memory, and we attribute everything that's happening in our culture to whoever's on top. And the reality is that presidents have, particularly when things are going well, very little impact on the economy and very little impact on what's going on. And a lot of times the bad stuff that's happening is because of 2 presidents ago, the things that they did are now we're feeling them, whether it's good or bad, right? So Jimmy Carter actually did all the deregulation that generated the good economy out of Ronald Reagan, and Ronald Reagan got all the credit for it, not Jimmy Carter. And you know, the same goes for inflation. It takes a while for inflation to pick up. So the fact that Trump was already inflating in 2020 because of COVID, we only felt the inflation in 2021, 2022, so we blamed it on Obama. So on Biden. So it's, yeah, I mean, people don't think these things through and don't have the right approach to really think about it and to divorce it from the personalities. It's so much easier to think about the Trump economy or the Biden economy than to think about the actual causal chain of events. And it's exactly the same phenomenon with Bibi, with Netanyahu. Thank you, Darius. Andrew.
Hi, Yaron.
Hey.
So I know in an altruistic culture, we're always having our heartstrings kind of tugged, but I would have genuine empathy and compassion for illegal immigrants if there was a mass deportation that actually occurred. And I was dismayed this week in the poll. I think it was the same poll that you were reading from the other day, where over half of Americans support mass deportations of illegal immigrants.
Yep.
I mean, how do you see that as a real possibility under a Trump administration?
I mean, they are taking it very, very seriously. And they are they're building the infrastructure to make it happen. That is administratively, in terms of the people they're going to appoint and in terms of how to set it all up. It certainly looks like they are getting ready for exactly that to happen. So I don't know.
Do you think it's like impractical though? I mean, there's like 10 million to 20 million illegal immigrants in the country.
Yeah, but I mean, partly it's what are they going to do? I mean, they promised this. This is a big part of the agenda, and you know, what do they do? What's actually going to happen? Now, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, but it seems like they're going to have to take some steps in order to achieve this, so whether they can really pull it off or not, just trying is going to be unbelievably damaging to this country. Rounding up people, I don't know where they put them, in holding facilities, and then deporting them, and then where do they deport them to? Because you can't just deport people. You can't kick them out unless the country other side is willing to accept them. And a lot of countries like Mexico said, we don't want them. And a lot of Venezuela doesn't want them. A lot of countries don't want them. Where are you going to put them? Are you going to send them to Africa just because the Africans are willing to accept them? It's just going to be, I
just got chills when you said holding cells.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, think of 10 million people in holding cells. It's like, you know, shit. It's internment camps. How far away from that is that? You know, I don't know. I don't want to be hyperbolic, but I think that it's pretty spooky.
Yep. Yeah. I just came across a quote from Thomas Sowell. I mean, Thomas Sowell has turned anti-immigration, which is unfortunate, but this is something he wrote years ago, 30 years ago, actually. But it's so true. It's still true today. This is what he wrote. I'm going to quote from Thomas Sowell about immigration. And I just came across this today. Quote, when I travel through California's vast agricultural areas, the people I see working in the fields under the hot sun are usually Mexicans. So are many of the people who clean the hotels. But when I have been approached by a panhandler in San Francisco or Los Angeles, it has never been a Mexican. Almost invariably, the panhandlers have been young, healthy-looking whites with middle-class accents. These men remind me of the old English expression, sturdy beggars. Just thought that was, and I think that's so true. But so many of we vilify and we imagine what would happen if we took 10 million people, almost all of whom are working, almost all of whom are invested in working, and deported them, rounded them up and deported them. Who would do the work? I mean, what happens to all those jobs? What happens to farming jobs? What happens to the gardening jobs? What happens to the retail jobs? Whatever it is that they're doing.
Don't the conservatives have an answer for that? That's kind of BS answer, but they have an answer for that? Like, well, companies will just raise the wages and Americans will take the job.
Unemployment is 3 point something percent. And so, maybe they can bring back 70-year-olds who've retired back to work because I'll pay them so much, which means, if they pay them that much, prices are going to have to come up. And if prices come up, all of our standard of living goes down, and Americans really willing to make that trade-off. I doubt it, but nobody thinks that far. Nobody actually considers it. It's something that it's not on the table. But yes, I think Trump is very serious about it. Whether it gets bogged down in the courts and it's being fought in the court system, whether they actually find legal loopholes to actually get it done. I mean, I think the actual doing of it is difficult, but I'm pretty sure that the Trump team right now is got the best experts that they can get, trying to figure out how to do this so they can do it right off the bat when they get started, because this is a very high priority for them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Amlan.
Hi. Yeah, sorry about that. So a little bit of a lighter question, get away from Israel and all this stuff for a second. In a good society, in a proper society, we obviously know that the government is going to have very limited role and a very limited number of facilities. But the facilities that they do have and the offices that they have and so forth, what would be the standard that you would see that they should have? Like, for example, a police station, a neighborhood police station, like, should it look nice? Should it be architecturally nice? What should be the standard of the offices that people work in? All that kind of stuff. Like, how would you determine that so that it's
I mean, I think it should be nice. It should be dignified. It's a place that should be, welcoming of the constituents. But it shouldn't be unbelievably lavish. It shouldn't be wasteful. Because part of it will be determined by, particularly on the local level, by how much money they raise, right? Because a lot of the raising money will be voluntary. And so how much money are people willing? And if people see that, they're living in luxury, they'll cut back on how much money they give, and the next police station won't quite be as nice.
Yeah.
So I think there's a kind of a self-correcting mechanism. If journalists actually did their job, a big part of journalism is to criticize government. That it's a big role they would have in a free society. And you could imagine them going and saying, whoa, look at these offices, how lavish they are, and the lunches that these guys go out for and the restaurants they go to. This is how your money is being spent. And that would have a real influence. It wouldn't be shrugged off. So I think it would be calibrated. But I think particularly at the federal level and at the state government level, there would be some dignity to the facilities, but it wouldn't be. I don't know, the FBI building. I think the new FBI building in DC is some modern, big, expensive, crazy building. I don't know. I don't know if that's too much or just right or. But it would have. It's like. If taxpayers don't like it, they'll stop paying.
Right.
Just the nice thing about voluntary taxation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The war that's being waged, you don't have to fund. That's the good thing about that mechanism.
Yeah. And what the reason I asked the question, like I have the great fortune of living in Canada, and all the nonsense we have here. And one of the things has been like just humongously wasteful spending on bureaucrats and politicians and other parasites, and it's just disgusting. And nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Nobody
It's
cares.
just,
Nobody cares.
yeah. In fact, a lot of people have the attitude of like, oh, it's okay. Like, they deserve it. Or if I was there, I would do the same. Like, okay, great.
And well, and Canada's got a certain part. This comes from Europe and maybe even particularly from France, where bureaucrats it's considered the best job you can get.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like it's lifetime employment. It's you get paid quite a bit.
Yep.
It's comfortable. It's easy. And
You don't have to work a lot.
and
Never get fired.
Yeah, you can't get fired. You get
Yeah.
get it's. France certainly has that, and I think a lot of European countries have that, and I think Canada has adopted part of that mentality.
Yeah, for sure.
And that goes with lavish, spending a lot of money on facilities and stuff like that.
Yeah.
One of the things that it reminds me that during Trump's presidency, there was a lot of talk about we need to build government buildings that reflect our conservative values. So they had a whole new architectural thing where they were only going to build government buildings that look like Greek temples, right? So they were going, they have the big columns and everything. God forbid they build anything modern, because modernity is the left, modern architecture is the left, and they are the right.
I think Greek was too good for them, Yaron. I think it was
What's that?
Roman. I think it was Roman. Greek's just too good for them.
Roman is just imitation Greek. So, but yeah, it was like conservative. It was like the way it used to be. This is great. It just, in my view, is government should not have a position on architecture. That's I get why the White House looks the way it is and why the Congress looks the way it is. But if those buildings would be built in the 20th century, hopefully they would be built based on architectural principles of the 20th century and not of the past. But
right.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
We've only got more people joining. All right, let's go with Steve. Thank you, Emlyn.
Hey, so I feel like I was horribly left in your interview on Monday with the physicist a bit confused. The conclusion seemed to be that we don't really know, or I don't really know, that the Earth goes around the sun and that there are these planets, because I kind of haven't derived this knowledge. And I don't know if that's a useful frame, because I haven't derived Bernoulli's principle either, but I've been on a lot of airplanes. They haven't fallen out of the sky yet. And I don't know a lot about electromagnetism, but the computers that we're using right now depend upon all these things being true. So
yeah, so it's not that this means you should be a skeptic, a cynic, right? But you should realize, it's worth thinking about, what would I have to do in order to know, let's say, like computer what would I have to, beyond the fact that, there are a lot of really smart people who design computers, and every time I turn it on, it works. And what would I have to know? I have the knowledge of this computer, right? Know that how it works, what it does. And the same is true about some things we know simply. What would it mean to have true firsthand knowledge of the fact that the Earth goes around the sun? Now, I think most of us have a lot of that knowledge. We've seen models of what it looks like. We know the Earth is round. We've traveled in an airplane. We've probably seen the horizon and how that works. We've seen ships disappear over the horizon. So we do have some of the firsthand knowledge that scientists have used in order to come to that conclusion. But it's just an issue of being able to differentiate between what you know from personal observation and personal experience and first-handedly, and what you know because you have rationally come to the conclusion you can trust certain people and you can trust certain things that are happening, and that, the physics there works. You don't know what it is, but it works, and that's okay. That's fine. I don't have to know it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, then how do you think about like knowledge that you get from like a book? You know, if we read a book about astronomy or whatever, from actually deriving it experimentally
it would depend on
yourself.
the quality of, it would depend on the kind of book you're getting. So I think I think what Keith was criticizing was that a lot of education is, this is the way it is. Here's a map. Here's how it is. This is what it is. And what he's arguing is the way to educate people, like in a book, about these things is show us the observations that people had to make in order to come to that conclusion. And then you could then relate to those observations, particularly with, I'd say, Platonic, Newtonian and pre-Newtonian physics. I think we can all relate to them because it's all about atoms. It's all about big stuff, right? Things that we can actually observe. And if you wanted to actually go look at a telescope and observe the stars, you could actually do it. Any one of us could do it. But a good science education is Keith's point is not just a list of facts and maybe the mathematics, but the actual observations that the scientists made. You don't have to make them yourself, but the scientists made, so that you understand the process by which they got to it. And you could recreate it if you wanted to, right? But, you know, who has time, right? And then I think, so that's his argument about what good science education would be. And that would even be true if we were studying quantum. You want to show the people the experiments, the challenge they create given, let's say, our standard physics models, and then why this was such a difficult thing, and why we don't have maybe the best explanations for what we're observing yet. Even though we have a bunch of theories about quantum, we don't exactly know. But the math works because we understand the phenomena enough to put equations to it, and the equations are accurate in their description.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm with you on quantum. I don't understand it, and I know I don't need to understand it.
Yeah. And I tried when I was a physics student, when I was in physics class, I tried to understand it. And at some point I said, okay, so a particle is a wave and a wave is a particle. Oh, wait, that requires new concepts that I don't have the capacity to hold. Or maybe I do, but who wants to spend the time doing it right now? I've got other things to do. And at some point, and I think Einstein stuff just went completely over my head. I couldn't get that. So, but I'm fine with that. I have no problem with it. Thanks, Steve. So I think a lot of what Keith was trying to talk about was, how to educate yourself or how to get a good education in science, rather than, telling you, or encouraging us to be skeptics about our knowledge. I don't think that was the purpose. All right, Tom. You're muted, Tom.
Yes, sir, I am. Hi, you hear me now?
Yes, hear you well.
Yaron, great to talk to you. We met once in Tallinn in Estonia, but
wow,
yeah,
I've only been in Estonia
time...
once, so I remember that. That's great.
Okay. So a lot of people, but I'm trying to get to the practical questions I have first, and maybe we can I can pick your brain on other stuff. Since this nice neighbor of ours here, Russia started the war, and things are going not really in the good direction. I've decided to move with the family away from Estonia, and we are looking at US.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you is, actually a question to everybody. If anybody knows a glass processing company who is looking for a manager, I'm your man. I have been in the business for over, I guess, 20 years now, so I know a thing or two. So if something comes up, do let me know.
Yeah.
and question is, which state, in your opinion, would be the best to go? Of course, in terms of the weather, we do like California, but it's not your favorite, from what I understand.
Well, I mean, I think two things. One is just to be realistic about coming to America. It's very difficult, as you probably
Yes.
know. It's even if you find a job, they have to be willing to sponsor you, and they have to. I mean, it's a long process, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and it can be very scary in many regards. America's made it very, very difficult for skilled, talented people to come to America, which
Yeah,
is
maybe we tried the Mexico border. I don't know yet.
yeah, I don't know. You might want to consider other places in the world before trying that one, because then
Right.
it's hard to make a living in the U.S. because they've made employers responsible for who's illegal and who's not, and you have to prove to your employer that you're legal. So it's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So maybe Argentina with Milei will want more immigrants. It might be easier to go there and long term.
No. The United States has been decided. So
There you go. Okay, good. I
But
don't know what state. I mean, it really depends on. I'd say the first criteria is where you find a job, right? The first criteria should be to get a good job, and California is fantastic. I love California. It's if you could hold the politics, if you could take the politics out of it, and you could take the cost of living out of it and the taxes out of it, it's the best place on planet Earth. It has the best weather. It's a beautiful state. It has clean, big roads. It's just the people are amazing. They're super productive, and it's the best. But it's unbelievably expensive, right? To live in a decent house, you're going to spend millions, right? And it's very, there's some places that are cheaper, but they're in the middle of the desert typically. So it's very expensive. Taxes are high, and they keep coming up with these crazy, insane laws that keep making it less and less attractive as a place to live in. And every week I read something, and at some point the state will go bankrupt or something awful will happen there. So I don't know. I mean, if I had to move back to the United States right now, I don't know where I would go. But California certainly has to be under consideration because of what a wonderful place to live it actually is. Look, Arizona, there's Phoenix, Scottsdale, even Tucson areas are great if you can tolerate the heat in the summer. And if you like dry weather, it's very, very dry. Texas is great. Particularly Austin. I like Austin a lot. But the summers are brutal. It's not only hot like Arizona, but the humidity is, out of this world. And the other thing about Texas is it's also got an awful government. It's got a horrible government when it comes to personal liberties and personal freedoms and religion and things like that. It can be really, really, really bad. So that's a mix. Florida, if you don't mind the weather, has got a pretty low level of regulation. And Tennessee, Memphis, not a bad place. Now, but you come from Estonia. Estonia is one of the coldest places on planet Earth. So in the winter, so the whole of America is open to you. I mean, you could go to Minnesota and think it was relatively warm, right?
That is true. Yeah, we have, as we say here, bad skiing weather all year round.
Yeah. What do you ski? It's all flat in Estonia, so it's
it's cross-country skiing.
Cross-country skiing because there's
Exactly.
nothing to go down. There's no downhill.
Yeah, the highest place is 300 meters.
I'd say the main thing is get a job, get somebody who will sponsor you for a green card. That is the only priority. Everything else you can manage. The U.S. is a pretty cool place to live. There are beautiful places everywhere. It's very easy and comfortable. I don't think you'll have a problem.
Okay. Next question along these lines. Would you invest today in real estate in the United States, and in what way, and maybe in which region as well? Because we have my family, we have some investments here. We are right now selling all the properties we have, and maybe moving the funds to the US. So any
I
advice?
would not invest in commercial real estate right now. And you know, maybe in a year or two, I think prices are still going down. They're already low, but I think they can still go down. So you probably got about a year, but before they bottom, something like that. I would not invest in single family housing. You know, you could invest in multifamily properties. I think those might be decent investments. Rents are still going up. There's a shortage of housing in the United States, so multifamily might be a good investment. In terms of where, I don't know. I mean, you'd have to, because that you know, it's all about supply and demand, and I don't know enough about the markets and where there's kind of an imbalance between those. But you would have to look and figure out. But I'm still worried about commercial real estate. I don't think we've seen the final pain point in terms of commercial real estate. I keep hearing stories, but I think you're going to see a lot of commercial real estate funds folding and going bankrupt, and it's going to take kind of blood in the streets before we see the bottom of the commercial real estate question. A lot of buildings were bought when interest rates were zero, that don't make any sense when interest rates are at 5%. And I don't think they've all been repriced. And when they get repriced, that's when the opportunity to buy is.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. Skylar,
Sir, greetings, Dr. Brook.
good to see you.
Greetings, room. Question. How often do you cringe when people say that America is democracy instead of a constitutional republic, and also a free country instead of a mixed one?
Look, I don't cringe as much as I used to, I guess, for a couple of reasons. One is people don't, depends why they're saying it, right? Most people don't think of democracy as majoritarian rule. They think of what we have in America as kind of a democracy, representational democracy, constitutional democracy. I think most people recognize that. So I think it's a mistake to be, I think we need to clarify it. I think it's important to say what we really want is a constitutional republic and limited government but I don't shy away from the word democracy like maybe I used to, just because I don't think it's what people mean when they say democracy. And the same with freedom, right? I mean, it's not that we're not free. We are free. We're just not as free as we should be. And then it's important to say we're not as free as we should be. We live in and it's not just a mixed economy, because it's not just in economics we're not free as we should be, right? I mean, free speech, other things. There's a bunch of different things where we're not as free as we should be that are not necessarily related to economics. So I think you just have to correct people and be gentle about it, because the reality is, I mean, how could they not be confused, right? Given our educational system, given the crap intellectuals we have, given the idiots we have in politics, how could people not be confused? Right. So it's a miracle that there's anybody who actually can think straight about the political the political and economic and reality that we have.
Thank you.
Do you think the intellectuals who are pushing the word democracy all the time are innocently confused?
Some of them. I think a lot of them are innocently confused. I just think there is a not legitimate, because but there's some confusion about how to use democracy, which I think is widespread, even among intellectuals. All right. Thanks, Skylar. Pini.
Thanks again.
Hi, everybody. Before my question, I just wanted to say a comment regarding the new format that you have. Personally, I find it not so great like before. Normally, I'm not watching it live because I'm working. So usually I come in the evening and I watch it. And an hour, especially the news roundup, the 1 hour is, I find it very good. But when I come and I say 2.5 hours or 3 hours, I don't have 3 hours in the evening. So either I'll watch a little bit and I'll stop, or so I find the old format was better. That's just personal thinking. Regarding a question regarding the elections now. I'm not in US. I'm Canadian. I think you know. So I know there are two very bad candidates, and shouldn't we do like I know that kind of if from Israeli point of view, I was Israeli, I would prefer Donald Trump from Israeli point of view. For some kind of objective way, I would look who is the vice president of nominee of Donald Trump and maybe go by that, because most likely neither one of them, especially not Biden, will finish the term if he ever. And then you need to look who is the next or who is going to influence. What do you think?
I think certainly with Biden, we know who the vice president is, and it's not very reassuring. In terms of who Trump's vice president is, I think, I don't know, because there's no reason to assume he won't finish the term. He's not that old, and he seems in decent physical shape. I mean, he's certainly running around the country campaigning, and he gives long lectures or whatever it's called, rallies, and he still manages that. So I unfortunately, I think he might live longer than I would like. So I'm not sure that the vice president candidate is going to matter that much. Look, I think that this election, it's a disaster, and there's just nothing more than that. It's just horrible. And I think when we have to realize to some extent that who the president is matters, it doesn't matter that much. And who's going to be president, I have very little influence on. Like you, I don't vote in these elections, luckily, because I don't like voting, and I particularly don't like voting for these kind of characters. So I would still look, and based on your evaluation of the long-term consequences of this or that person rising, vote. I mean, I have to say, and I know I'll be hated for this, I really do wish Hillary Clinton had won in 2016, because I think the damage Donald Trump has done to the Republican Party and to America is so great that I don't think Hillary Clinton could have done anything close to this. And that's what I mean by long-term. Maybe policy by policy, during those 4 years, Donald Trump was much better. But looking at what he's done to the Republican Party and looking at what the projection is down the road for the Republican Party, I think Hillary would have done less damage. I think if Donald Trump had lost in 2016, there would have been a complete correction of the road. And now we're stuck with MAGA, maybe for the rest of our lives. We're going to have this MAGA party, which is, I think, a frigging disaster. So I don't know. I don't have the formula for how to make choices between such two bad candidates. Certainly, who they pick as vice presidents makes some difference, but not a lot. I mean, look, if Donald Trump picks somebody who you think, let's say in 2020, would have helped him overturn the election, would supported his effort to overturn the election, that would rule out voting for that person, right? So if Donald Trump picks Carrie Lake, Carrie Lake, she's running for Senate in Arizona. If he picks Carrie Lake, which a lot of people have talked about, that him picking her as his vice president candidate, nobody should vote for Donald Trump. Because that basically means that if he loses, there's no way he will overturn any election because his vice president will help him. They won't do what Mike Pence did last time, which was the honorable thing to do, and tell your boss to go to hell, which is what Mike Pence did. So I don't know. That's the best I can do. On the negative, I can figure it out. On the positive, I just don't know, because I think Donald Trump will survive the presidency. I think he'll live through it.
Do you agree that for Israel it is better Donald Trump?
Probably. But I'm not sure, because Donald Trump could arrive and say, let's cut a deal. Let's make a deal. Let's bring all the parties together and make a deal. Because that's all he cares about is him being at the center of attention and cutting a deal. And I'm not sure a deal will be a pro-Israel deal, because I don't think the Arabs would ever accept a pro-Israel deal. So I don't know, but it's probably because Biden is so bad. Biden is so bad on Israel, and likely to be worse in a second term. All right, Randy. Randy. You're muted. I don't know if you're talking. All right, Randy's on mute. All right, let's go to Nick. I'll try Randy later. Can't hear you, Nick. You're not muted, but we can't hear you. This has happened before. Still can't hear you. Nope. Something with a connection. All right. Let's see if Randy's fixed his. Randy, you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me all right?
Let's do Randy, and I'll come back to you, Nick, in a few minutes. Yeah. I can hear you fine.
Yeah. I had a question I put in the registration. It was, is there any good U.S. history books that you would recommend that you think are really well done and objective?
Oh, wow. I had something here. God, where is it? I mean, this isn't bad. It's obviously skewed by the title, but it's called A Patriot's History of the United States by Larry Schweikart and Michael Allen.
Okay.
So I don't know if you can see that.
I see it. Good. And
And
now I've got to ask you, the author of the book you have there on Logic on your bookshelf.
oh, this one, I've got two Logic books. They're both good. One is by Lionel Ruby, and the other one is by H.W.B. Joseph.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Sure. And if I remember right, both books were recommended by Leonard Peikoff.
Good. All right. Very
Support.
good. Thanks.
Sure. All right, let's see. Nick, you want to try again?
You hear me?
Yeah, can you hear you now?
Okay, excellent. I was listening to the Safedin Ammous debate that you had, right, a month ago?
Yep.
And he seemed to be. By the way, have you had more? Have you had on the topic? Have you had other debates on the Israeli issue with either 10 years ago or whatever? I know you've done talks.
I don't think so.
What a shame, because you're an expert on geopolitics and you'd be a killer out there.
Organize one.
Oh, yeah, but put it on me.
I said often, I go where I'm invited. If somebody wants me to do a debate, get me an opponent. Yeah.
Or talk with what's his name? You tried, but he didn't respond back to you. What's his name? You know who I'm talking about. Oh God, the name escapes me. All right. Anyways, back to the Safedin. Now I was listening to the whole debate, right? And he seems focused on piecemeal land claims in the West Bank and whatever, right? Now, I was thinking Well, there's two strategies because I've heard a lot of these debates. One, a lot of the debaters who are against Israel, use the land claims as a Trojan horse because what they really want is a Muslim majority via the right of return, right? But he was singularly focused on the land claims, so he had a more honest representation. But isn't the whole point mute? Because isn't there a statute of limitations on how many years you can go back? And secondly, there's also a principle of law. Like there's winners and losers in a war. You can't do a redo 76 years later for 1948 and 58 years later for 1967. I mean, if we did that, we'd be redoing World War II over again. It's insane. These arguments are totally insane. So, I mean, why would you even go there in terms of debating? I mean, you just say it off the bat. You can't do a redo. There's winners and losers. You lost. Deal with it. End of story.
That's what I said, basically. I said, look, they abandoned their property. They lost the war. It's done. It's done. So, but he is trying to be a libertarian, which means, free markets. Free markets are based on property rights. His family owned property. It's not theirs anymore. Why can't they get their property back? Well, because you lost the war, because you abandoned the property. And so, but he wouldn't accept that. And he never actually addressed that point that I kept making about abandoned property and about losing the war and about that, not just losing a war, but losing a war you initiated, your people initiated.
Right. And as a point of law, when you fight a war and you're defending, you actually get to keep the spoils if you win. That's the way.
Well, I mean, the UN doesn't recognize that, right? So the UN.
I thought it was international law because I heard some other commentators say that.
I don't think so. I mean, maybe in the past, but the UN has resolutions over and over and over again saying Israel has to return this, Israel has to return that. So the reality is that you can't appeal to international law because international law is completely corrupt, as you can see now with this International Court of Justice going after Israel for defending itself. You can't appeal to international law, but the reality is Israel's not going anywhere. It's not going to give you your land back. You lost the war. Get on with life. That's not just reality. It's also the moral law. It's moral because you started the war. You have to pay for the fact that you started the war.
And what about the Trojan horse? A lot of commentators that are anti-Israel use. They use the land issue, but their real goal is to leverage that so they can get a Muslim majority there.
Look, I mean, it's all Trojan horses in order to destroy Israel. What they really want is to destroy Israel. That's their goal. And they'll use whatever excuse they can find, right? I mean, what about all the land and the property that was stolen from the Jews who were forced to leave Arab countries in the late 40s, early 50s? I mean, the Jews lost more property and wealth having to left behind in Arab countries than the Arabs did leaving Palestine. And yet no Jew in Israel is claiming their property back from the Iraqi government or from the Moroccan government. That just doesn't exist because they got kicked out and they made a life somewhere else and they're living their life. It's the Palestinians are completely focused on the past, and you're right. It's all Trojan horses ultimately just to undermine Israel and to destroy it.
Even the right of return. I mean, they want to have the right of return. All these people are dead. And they want to pass the right of return to their grandchildren.
Of course.
I've never heard of anything so ludicrous.
Of course. Yep. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks, Nick.
By the way, just one last super quick thing. I was listening to Ron Dermer, who was the ambassador of Israel to the U.S. He was excellent commentating. He was taking on all anti-news commentators last week. I thought I'd mention him because you were talking about some ambassadors. Very articulate. His name is Ron Dermer.
A lot of the Israeli ambassadors seem to be very good. Yeah,
they're brilliant, articulate, to the point. Yeah, if you have a chance, listen to them.
Good.
Yaron, when you argue about this, when you debate it, or talk about it, do you present the part about Israel being just in taking the land?
Yeah. Yeah. I say if you initiate force, you lose the right to the property that you used in order to initiate the force.
Yeah.
You can't
Okay.
claim right once you violate rights. This is why you go to jail, right? They lock you up. You don't have a right to move anymore once you violated somebody else's rights. You can't put people in jail after a war. So, the fact that their property is being taken from them because they're not there anymore. They're gone. They're in the equivalent of jail, which is they left. They committed, an exodus. They don't have a right to return. All right, Ryan.
I'm actually just hanging out today. I don't have any prepared
Good.
questions. So
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Michael. Michael is muted. Michael is still muted. Maybe Michael's hanging out as well, too. All right, I think we've gone through everybody. Did I miss somebody? There's a big group, so let me know if I missed somebody. I think I did everybody round one. All right, I'm going to do these three super chat questions, and then we'll come back to you guys. Liam, for $50. How did you develop a thick skin with all the haters and ugliness out there? As a public figure, you must be exposed to it constantly. Cynics, nihilists, always thinking of ways to crush your spirit and make you unsure of yourself. How did I develop a thick skin? I don't know. Sometimes when you listen to my podcast, don't you get a sense that I don't have a thick skin? I go after some of these people in the chat. It seems like it's not that thick. The way you develop a thick skin is two things. One, self-esteem, self-confidence, know your stuff. Don't let them challenge you. Don't let them make you unsure of yourself. They can try. But so the first thing is self-esteem and self-confidence, and just build up that body of knowledge. Answer the questions. So one of the things is challenge yourself to take every question seriously and actually answer it. Don't dismiss questions. Oh, he's just being a cynic. No, okay, let me try to figure that, because in answering the questions, you'll discover whether you really know stuff or don't. And until you either write about a topic or teach a topic, you don't really know it. Going back to Steve's question, you really need to think something through in order to know it. So do that. And then the other thing is have a life. So if you have a life, then in a sense, what I mean by that is have values, have things that you do that you love, have places that you go that you love, have people that you hang out with that you love, have a life. And in that sense, if they want to be ugly, they're the ones who are ugly. It doesn't rub off on me. I have my beautiful home, my beautiful wife, my beautiful things, my life, which is amazing. I'm not going to let their ugliness, diminish the good that I have surrounded myself with. But to achieve that, you have to achieve it. That is, you have to make your life amazing so that you can stand up to the ugliness and go, it's not going to touch me. It's horrible out there. It's terrible, and I wish it wasn't so. But I have a character and a soul that is. I'm not going to allow this ugliness to infect, and I have a life that I won't let this ugliness infect. And for that, certainly you have to have self-esteem, and part of that self-esteem needs to come from having created that kind of a life. Hopefully that helps. James, Aristotle had organizing one's mind according to similarities, but he didn't have measurement omission. According to Rand, this is the only way to move from concretes to abstractions. Characteristics within a range. This is the, okay. Characteristics within a range after the measurements are omitted. All right, I don't understand. There are question marks here, but I don't get the question. So I don't know what you're asking. Is it true that Aristotle had similarities but didn't have a measure and omission? As far as I know, yes, that's true. Again, I'm not an expert on Aristotle, but that seems right. Measurement and omission is a uniquely Ayn Rand discovery and an important one. Yes, we do the measurement and omission without really realizing it. That's how we have concepts. What Rand is doing is she's making explicit a process that happens implicitly, that we do, it's the way the human consciousness works, and she is giving it explicit understanding. And you can, it's fascinating once you have this knowledge to watch children as they're forming concepts, and to see them actually doing this is pretty cool. And I think she's absolutely right about this is the way in which human consciousness, the unique characteristic of human reason, this is what it does, whether we do it explicitly or not. And of course, once we have it explicit, I think this should be something that dramatically contributes to our clarity around our concepts and our ability to create new conceptual knowledge. And finally, characteristic within a range after the measurements are omitted. Yes, I mean, so once the measurement or omission omitted, the folder includes all the different measurements that still have, the fundamental similarities. Somebody said something. All right, thanks, James. Let's see, Clark. Altruism is the morality of sacrificing ability to need. Israel has the ability, Palestinians have the need. So Israel needs to sacrifice its selfish desire for self-defense to meet the needs of the weaker group. Absolutely. And that is the core of, you can't understand what's going on in the world, in the Middle East right now, and the world's attitude towards it without understanding the world of altruism and altruistic morality. It's exactly that. It's a sacrifice of ability, of strength, of virtue, to lack of ability, lack of strength, need, and lack of virtue, because ability, success comes from virtue. And that explains the world's attitude towards Israel. There's just no question about it. Okay, thanks, Clark. Appreciate it. All right, rest of the questions we'll answer at the end of next round. All right, let's see. Okay, all the people got jumbled up here. So I have Randy is first this time around. So the order is going to be very different this time. Sorry, Randy. You got to unmute.
I don't have any more questions.
Okay.
I'm fine. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Randy. Nick. Unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. My question is on what viable, back to the Israeli question, what viable one-state solutions have you seen? I know Carolyn Glick has her version. There's others, but what have you seen? I know you're in favor of it too. What viable versions do you have that incorporates the West Bank and the demographics, or partial, or what do you see, what would work that you've seen out there?
Well, I mean, the only viable one-state solution is way out into the future. It's not tomorrow, and it relies on the reform and a complete change in ideology of the Arab population in the West Bank and Gaza. It means that population has to be westernized. It means that population has to gain respect for Western values, for the values of individualism and the values of reason and the values of political freedom. They can still be somewhat religious, but they can't have religion as a primary. They certainly, so they basically have to be Westernized. And then, they can be integrated into Israeli society. And if they don't want to be Westernized and they don't want to be integrated, they need to be encouraged to leave. I think that is the only way to have a one-state solution. But the reality is that's the only way to have a two-state solution, right? As long as the Arabs hold on to barbaric, tribal, religious, nationalist ideas, we can't have a two-state solution either, because the Arab state will be too close to Israel and would be too susceptible to inflict October 7th-like events on Israel all the time. So the only way a solution is possible in this area is for the Arabs to be Westernized. Now, some argue that the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates have already, to some extent at least, or to a large extent, already been Westernized, at least to the extent of rejecting anti-Semitism and wanting economic progress. I'm skeptical about how Westernized they really are, but I think to really live with the Palestinians in a one or two state solution, they have to go even beyond where Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are today. But that would be a beginning, right? That would be a first step, is to just get to the point where they're the UAE, the Dubai. But I'd like to see them go more than that, to literal Westernization.
But that's decades away. We're talking about 30, 40, 50 years, generations.
Yeah, there is no solution before that.
So in the meantime, what do you do between that and 40 years from now?
You try to make it so that happens, right? You try to make it so that they get Westernized. So you occupy them, you run your schools, you run their education departments, and you suppress any attempt they make to do anything militarized, and you wait.
So basically, you keep the status quo, but try to modernize.
Well, no, the status quo sucks. The status quo, Israel is not insisting that they Westernize. In the status quo, Israel is not involved in what they use as educational material. In the status quo, Israel gives them far too much freedom, far too much decision-making over their own lives. No, I'm talking about much different than the status quo.
What about getting rid of UNRWA, all those UN agencies?
Yeah, that's obvious. That's like stage 0. That is step 1. Yeah, you have to do that. But you have to get rid of a lot of more than that. Yeah. Look, it takes at least a generation, probably 2. You know why God kept the Jews in the desert for 40 years before he allowed them to enter the promised land? Like, the Bible sometimes has interesting lessons. And then
he was a sadist?
But what's that?
Because he was a sadist?
No. I mean, there's a rational reason that isn't completely insane. Why does God tell the Jews, no, you're not going to the promised land. You're staying in the desert.
Next generation.
Why next generation?
He wanted one generation to die, the one that used to being slave and being in Egypt, and have a new generation that can think about freedom.
Absolutely. So he basically said, you guys were raised under slavery. You have the mentality of slaves. You're not ready to be a free people in a free land. You're not ready to protect your own values, rights, whatever you want to call it. So we need that generation, a generation of slaves, to die off. It'll take about 40 years before all the slaves are dead. Remember, life expectancy in those days was a lot shorter. And everybody that enters the new land will have been born in a free society and will be willing to fight for a free society, a free based on the interpretation of like biblical times. And you will have fought for it. So you will value it. You wouldn't have just been handed it to you by God. So it's not complete insanity, right? The biblical stories teach a message. Some of it good, some of it stupid, but this one's actually a good message. Sometimes you have to. It takes time. It takes time, right? And to
You're
reach
making God sound like Thomas
population, it's going to
Jefferson.
take 40
Yaron.
years. What's that, Andrew?
You're making God sound like Thomas Jefferson.
I mean, God is not. Remember, God is just whatever really, really smart people wrote into the stories, and half the time, God is quite reasonable and interesting, and he says okay things. Other times, he's a real jerk. I mean, and a homicidal, crazy maniac. But it's reflective of the thinkers who wrote the stories. I mean, these are stories, and it's literature, and a lot of literature has interesting things to say, even when its overall philosophical message is bad. And I'm with Jordan Peterson on this. The biblical stories are interesting, and we should know them to a large extent, not only because sometimes there's real wisdom there, but more so because you can't understand the mentality of people without understanding the biblical stories. Like I often talk about, oh, that's just the Garden of Eden phenomena, right? Because it is. There's a huge Garden of Eden phenomena in our world, and you can't understand it unless you understand that people grew up with these stories. They grow up with Garden of Eden. They grow up with this idea that the ideal world, ideal life, the perfect life is to be in a garden naked with all your needs taken care of. And indeed, you remember how God punishes man for eating from the fruit of life, from the fruit of knowledge? You now have to work for a living. So why is work deemed in the world out there as punishment, as a burden? Well, it comes from these stories. Now, partially because it was a burden for most of human history, but there's a reason why this story reflects that history. Anyway, biblical stories are fascinating. They're really, really interesting. They don't usually reflect what the religious people would like them to. And my lessons from them are the exact opposite of what Jordan Peterson's are. But doesn't mean they're not interesting. I should do like Jordan. I should do a whole series of biblical stories and my interpretation of them. I would if I could get an audience of 500 people to pay. What did he used to charge for those? $100 a person. And used to make a fortune for those biblical things in Toronto. He used to rent a theater in Toronto, and people used to pay huge amounts of money to come and hear him talk. Nobody pays a huge amount of money to come hear me talk. All right, Petey.
Yeah, speaking of religion and altruism, I have hard time to understand how altruism is the most opposite to human nature. You take young kids, they are not altruists. They will care about themselves, they want stuff. And so how in all the different cultures and countries and so on, the altruism take over when it's so opposite to the basic human nature in the deepest way? How is it possible?
Well, because morality, thinking, figuring out stuff is a huge achievement. And so I think the way human beings evolved culturally, so this is after their biological evolution, they didn't know anything. They didn't understand how the world worked. They didn't understand anything else. And the people who took advantage of human ignorance, human beings are ignorant, unbelievably ignorant in a starting off place, right? Little children, they know nothing, completely ignorant. People took advantage of that. And this is what Ayn Rand talks about Attila and the witch doctor, right? So the leadership of the tribe, the intellectual leadership, the tribal leadership, they basically conspired against the people. And they were, because people were ignorant and because thinking and figuring out what's good for human beings is an achievement, I think people reverted to the idea that they couldn't survive without the tribe. The tribe was the unit by which to survive. I still hear this by people tell me even today, you can't survive alone, So the tribe is the unit of measurement. If you look at conservatives today, they tell you that the unit of measurement is not the individual. Conservatives today tell you the unit of measurement is the family. So everything must be done to protect the family, not the individual. But really, the unit of measurement is the tribe, because we can't survive alone, so we need the tribe. And therefore, if the tribe is a unit of measurement, and it's very hard to have the confidence to leave the tribe, I'm sure some people did, but most people stayed, then we need to know what's good for the tribe. And we need and then the political leaders take advantage of that by telling us, well, what's good for the tribe is you to sacrifice for the tribe. And how do we know what's good for the tribe? Well, I'll tell you. And how do we trust you? Well, the witch doctor over here communes with the spirit of the tribe, and that spirit tells him and he tells me, and listen to us. And really, Christianity is just an evolution of that. And modern politics is just an evolution of that. What's in the public interest? I know. Don't worry. I got it. I got the public interest. And it's still true that people are afraid of this idea of living for themselves. And partially because Christianity and other religions have done such a good job of convincing people that egoism or self-interest or selfishness is a nasty thing. Nasty, nasty thing. So, I mean, and it's much easier for us because we've read Ayn Rand, right? So we know, and it's like, yeah, this is obvious. But, why doesn't everybody get it? But it's not. It took Ayn Rand. Why has no thinker in 10,000 years come up with this? Because it's a huge achievement to think in those terms. Aristotle came close, but it's a huge achievement. Thanks, Beanie. Skylar.
Yes, sir. I was looking at the Phil Donahue interview with Ayn Rand, and she was talking about how he was addressing how it was a matter of intelligence to have faith or be mystical. And she said it was really not really a matter of intelligence at all. It was a bad sign psychologically. So is that kind of like not, I wouldn't say completely a mental illness for people that have faith, but is that like on the road to it, or is that like related to it in some way?
No, I mean, I think we need to be careful to distinguish between psychological issues and mental health issues, or maybe psychiatric issues. I mean, I think of mental health issues as a something physically wrong, right? The chemicals imbalance in the brain, some structural brain thing. Now, the two are related probably. I don't know enough about this, but probably it's true that psychological problems can have an impact on your brain chemistry. They can cause deeper problems, and the other way around is true. No, I think for her, what she meant was religion is a consequence of low self-esteem. Religion is a consequence of fear, which is related to low self-esteem. Religion is a consequence of unwillingness to stand on your own 2 feet and separate yourself from the tribe. Everybody around you is religious. Who am I to challenge that? Again, goes back to fear, lack of independence, which can be all psychological, right? But they're not necessarily mental health issues in the sense that, oh, his brain is all screwed up chemically or structurally.
Okay.
Makes sense?
Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. Andrew.
Yeah, just to follow that up, I mean, she really said exactly what you said, kind of in a couple of sentences after she said it's a psychological weakness. She basically said like a fear of standing on one's own mentally, Yep. So I wanted to ask you, why do you think, I mean, maybe you don't think this, if you think that conservatism has a problem with sexism or misogyny, why do you think so?
I think some conservatives do, and probably as an ideology, to the extent that it is an ideology, I'm not even sure it is an ideology, it does. But The reason is partially conservatism is about tradition. It's about the past. And that has been the role of women, and the role of men in the past has been one is subservient to the other. The woman's place is in the kitchen, the woman's place is by the stove, having kids. So that's part of it. I think the other part of it is the centrality of the family. And as a consequence, if you're going to make the family center, if that's going to be your focus, then, women tend to be responsible for the family. Then therefore they shouldn't pursue a career. They should stay at home. They should nurture and grow the family. It's collectivism. You see that now in all the discussions. They're everywhere. I mean, it's amazing how they're just everywhere about the fact that we're not having a lot of children. And so it's the woman's responsibility to the tribe, to the collective, to the nation, to the state, to have a lot of children. And we need to make sure that she does. She's the one who has control over this. So I think it's all of that. I think it's a harkening back to a past. But it boils down to, again, a lack of self-esteem on the part of the males. They need to put somebody else down because they don't quite have themselves elevated. It's this family issue. And it's, look, at the end of the day, it's a lack of individualism as an ideology. It's a rejection of individualism as an ideology, and a form of collectivism. And collectivism says this group has this role in society, that group has another role in society, and let's get them back to their roles, without treating women as individuals and saying, well, some woman wants to have lots of babies and stay home and take care of them. That's fine. That's great. No problem. And some women want to have a career, and that's fine. That's great. No problem. Because they can't think individually. They only can think in terms of classes, in terms of groups, in terms of,
the last thing I saw that's a really interesting answer. And the last thing I saw on Twitter, like that, I don't know if I would call it misogynistic, but it kind of has tones of it, where some conservative was lamenting that like women are having children later, and they all need, supposedly, like assistance, from IVF and from, and I was kind of like, well, why isn't that a good thing that medical science has gotten to a point where women can have children later and prioritize things earlier? But that's not the conservative view. It's like just basically having children earlier.
Why isn't it better to have kids when you're older, more mature, more responsible, more knowledgeable, and therefore maybe a better parent, right? But they don't think in terms of individuals again. Even in terms of individual kids, they think in terms of, no, if women are having children late, they're going to have fewer children, and that's bad for the country. The country needs 2.1 children per couple, 2.1 guys. And if you only have 2, and if you have 1, God, you're basically betraying the tribe. You're betraying the state.
Yep.
All right, John.
Yeah, Aaron, an easy one and maybe a hard one. I heard last week that the subscribers are going to get to view lots of nude female sculptures. And I don't know the difference between being a member and being a subscriber.
Oh, God. So, unfortunately, there are a lot of different memberships, but this particular membership is a membership on YouTube. So it requires signing up on YouTube for a membership. And if you go to YouTube, you can find there is a button that allows you to become a member on YouTube. You can do it for as little as $4.99.
I think that's a subscriber.
A subscriber is just somebody who gets notifications about the channel and things like that. One pays and the other doesn't. How about that as a difference?
Okay, sounds good.
The subscriber is just free. It's just notification. The member has to pay, and you get these extra shows as a result.
Okay. help me, if you would, try to understand the differences between objectivist philosophers, or whether it be Leonard Peikoff or Harry or John Ridley or Greg. They're all philosophers. Is there a different way, or is there a way of this one looked at this one looked at that? I've tried reading lots and I come out confused.
Well, that's not good. No, I think, I don't know that there's any easy way to categorize them all. I mean, they all have different personalities. They all have different interests. They all have different contexts. So they have a different history. They know different things. And I think that explains the differences that you might observe between them. And they might disagree about certain things within objectivism or outside of objectivism. Leonard is the student of Ayn Rand, so he's the direct link to Ayn Rand, and he wrote the definitive book about Ayn Rand's philosophy, Opal, right? That is the definitive book. Harry, while he knew Ayn Rand, wasn't quite a student of hers as Leonard was. And Harry's expertise is in epistemology. That's what interests him, and that's what he's focused on much of his career, and applying epistemology to math, to economics, to other things. Tara Smith has been mostly more interested in ethics, but then also legal philosophy. So it's just a question of what they're interested in and what they've written about. I don't think there's any way to say, yeah, I don't know what other way to categorize them would be, I guess.
Thank you.
Sure. Amlin.
Yeah, so another probably simple question, but one that interests me quite a bit. In a objectivist society or a free society, we wouldn't have regulations, but how would you incentivize providers of services or goods or whatever to protect people who aren't a party to the transaction? So let me give you a couple of examples, like aircraft. It's great. The aircraft insurers are going to have an interest and all this kind of stuff. But, would you, for example, make insurance mandatory or do something like that? Because if an airplane has a problem and crashes somewhere and kills people on the ground, they were not a party to the original, taking the flight. Nuclear plants would be another example, like something that can cause a lot of damage if it's not safe.
Yep.
How would you have a market-driven incentive to do that?
So I think in almost all cases, a lot of the incentive is the ex post liability. That is, if an airplane crashes into a building, it will be sued by the survivors, and it could, if it doesn't have insurance, for example, it will go out of business. It will just go out of business. So they're going to have insurance, and they're going to be so that they don't go out of business, and then they're going to try not to crash the building because they know what will happen even with insurance, and the insurance company has an incentive to monitor them and to secure that. So in almost all cases, the way in which this happens is through ex post legal action and the ability to project that ex post legal action. Now, nuclear power plants, you could say, may be different. I'm not sure because, we've never really had a nuclear accident, particularly not in the West, where there was real damage. So, I don't think nuclear reactors can explode, right? I don't think that the technology is an explosion technology. I think the risk is leakage. The risk is, so it's unlikely that a nuclear reactor kills millions of people, right? It could, again, do a lot of damage to maybe thousands of people. And again, I think the people who would be damaged are going to be able to sue you. even if you don't have insurance, you go out of business. Look, there are other people within the company that have an incentive to keep you safe. For example, I mean, here's the real problem, right? The real problem is, and maybe nuclear power plants, you could force them to have insurance, because I mean, the real problem is that, let's say you're a utility with a nuclear power plant, and you've got shareholders, and the shareholders don't want the business to go bust, so they have a strong interest in keeping it safe. But let's say the nuclear power plant is approaching bankruptcy anyway; it's almost bust, and they could add something, or they could change something that would increase the risk of leakage on the one hand, but if it was successful, it would get them out of bankruptcy. The shareholders would make a lot of money.
Right.
Now there's a real incentive. There's somewhat of an incentive to do it, because they're going to go bankrupt probably anyway. This is called moral hazard, right? And moral hazard. And here you might do a couple of things with nuclear power plants. For example, you could require them to have insurance, and then the insurance company has an incentive not to allow them to take that risk. Another way is you could require them to have debt.
Okay.
Because debt doesn't get wiped out in bankruptcy if the bankruptcy is slow and steady, but it can get wiped out if the bankruptcy is, big,
right,
and dramatic.
Okay.
So that has an incentive to prevent it. Or you could have it, and this might be interesting. You could say anybody who builds a nuclear power plant, and we're assuming it's a risky technology, right? Because I think the mini ones are probably not, but let's assume it's a risky technology. Anybody who engages in a risky technology, shareholders don't get limited liability. You get full liability. So bankruptcy doesn't spare you. They come after your personal assets.
Right.
And that could be a way to incentivize people, make this safe, make it so they're never going to come up after my personal assets.
Right, right.
So those are the least intrusive mechanisms I can think of.
Okay.
In cases where you really think there might not be a market solution to catastrophic loss.
Yeah. Yeah. And also the post facto thing, I mean, criminal liability would still be a factor there too, right?
Yes.
Like if you operate something like a nuclear plant and you just take zero care, I mean, that's I don't know how you word those things. I'm not sure I'm a big fan of, like, what does a reasonable
criminal
person
negligence
think and all those things. But
I think there's criminal negligence.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
So
Thanks.
you were so negligent.
Yeah.
You caused people harm.
Yeah.
And you knew there was a high likelihood you would cause people harm, and you could go to jail for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes. I think criminal negligence would be a good one.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Sure. All right, let's see. Steve.
So as an intellectual and someone who has run or started businesses and run like a reasonably large organization, I guess, how has objectivism shaped your approach to either management or leadership?
It's a good question. I mean, I'd say that it's primarily applying the virtues that you would apply to yourself to now apply them in and through the organization. So make sure that they're trying to make sure that they're embedded in the organization, that there's a culture of honesty, there's a culture of reason, a culture of reason, that things are thought through, that is explicit, that it's before we act, let's really think this through. Every one of the virtues, justice in terms of how you compensate your employees and how you reward them and how you what you say to them and how you pat them on the back or don't pat them on the back and things like that. So all of those things are a part of what justice would be and applying justice within organizations. So I think it's basically taking the objectivist virtues and, and applying them consistently across the organization and making sure it becomes part of the organization's culture. It's not easy to do, but that should be the goal, I think, from an objectivist, as an objectivist leader. And then in terms of leadership, I think leadership is really modeling that, right? It's modeling that, being open, being forthright. Leadership brings the dimension of long-term thinking, of not being rational, but really explicitly thinking about the long term. In that sense, being strategic, thinking about strategy and thinking about strategic and communicating them, and being open and clear about what that means. Yeah, I mean, I think that would be, it's just living up to the standards that you've set, living up to that moral code, I think, is the key in terms of leadership. And then, productiveness is probably the easiest one, being productive, actually adding value, making sure that you're adding value, making sure that you reward people who add value, all of that. Make sense?
Yeah, I think this is an area, I guess, interest to me that, like, as you think about guests in the future who might also have thoughts on these topics. I got a lot. There was a CEO of a bank that I think you interviewed a few years ago.
Don Allison.
Yeah, he had some like really interesting thoughts. I was like, oh,
yeah.
like I would have been like
a good book about
for.
He has a good book about leadership that I think is worth finding. It's on Amazon. Just look his name up. You'll find it on Amazon.
Thanks.
Sure. Adam.
Recently, there was a synchronized series of provocations with China essentially encircling Taiwan with a naval blockade, Russia expanding its claims in the Baltic, and of course, the Iran attack on Israel. And what I noticed is that the US does not generally sell F-15s and F-22s, which are really necessary for air superiority, to its allies. In other words, our allies depend on our X-15s and X-22s to maintain air superiority. Do we have enough of them to do that in all three theaters at once?
So you're talking about F-16s? I mean, the United States...
F-16s we sell.
F-35?
F-35s we sell. Okay, those are multi-purpose aircraft.
Yep.
Now, the other type of aircraft that is needed to maintain air superiority
F-22
is the F-22 and F-15, which F-15 is not stealth, so it's visible on radar, but it's still useful to maintain air superiority.
I mean,
and we don't sell those.
I think I don't know that we don't sell F-15s. I think they're not. Nobody's.
Israel have them. Israel have them.
I know Israel has them.
I worked on them
for years.
Yeah, I worked on them.
Yep. Israel has.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Israel has
F-22. F-22 they don't sell to any country.
Yeah, F-22 they don't sell to any country, and we don't have a lot of them. That is, the F-22 was very expensive, and they have. I think the U.S. has decided that they don't need F-22s, and the focus they have put is on the F-35, with the idea, I don't think this is true, but the idea is the F-35 is almost as good as an F-22 as an air superiority plane. So the marginal difference between an F-22 and F-35, it's not worth having an airplane that is just for air superiority when you can have a multi-purpose airplane like the F-35 that's almost as good when it comes to air superiority as the F-22. So because of the expense, they've decided to standardize. Years ago, they decided this, to standardize on one plane. And you know, there's an F-35 version for the Navy, and an F-35 version for the Air Force, an F-35 version. There are all kinds of F-35 versions. So the idea is use the F-35 for everything. We don't have a lot of F-22s, but of course, you know, the flip side of this is who are we fighting against, right? So, you know, I'm going to make a statement. I'm not an expert on this, but I think this is true. I think a good, you know, I certainly think an F-35 can take any other airplane that any country has produced in the world today easily. I don't think it's even close. I don't think there's a single airplane that the Russians or the Chinese have that can stand up to an F-35, never mind an F-22 in an air-to-air battle. And I think that an F-16 or an F-15 can take out almost all, if not all, Russian or Chinese airplanes. So even the previous generation of airplanes that the U.S. made, particularly if they've been upgraded, like the Israeli Air Force has upgraded all these planes, can stand up to the top of the line Russian planes. It really is no contest. We have, I don't know how long we'll have it, but today the United States has a massive technological advantage over the rest of the world. That's just the reality. The only area in which, you know, we would struggle against the Chinese is, you know, just the sheer number of missiles they could launch. You know, the Chinese can just overwhelm our missile defense systems in terms of sheer numbers. So, for example, do our aircraft carriers have enough missile defense systems to be able to protect themselves from drone swarms and anti-ship missiles that the Chinese could send at them? No, they don't. They're very vulnerable. I think that's the areas in which we're vulnerable. We're not vulnerable in the air. We're not even vulnerable in the ocean if you just sea-to-sea combat. Where we are vulnerable is land to sea. That is in defending against missiles, like you're seeing the Houthis launch against ships, and you know. But imagine much more sophisticated, like the Chinese have, and particularly if they have the hypersonic missiles. We just don't have the technology and enough of it to be able to defend effectively against that. That's the weakness. By the way, somebody in the chat said that both Saudi Arabia and Qatar have F-15s. So F-15s have been exported. It's only the F-22 that is not exported. And it's mainly because the United States has decided to de-emphasize the plane and not invest.
A related question is, why didn't we destroy the Houthis?
Sorry. Why do we never destroy the bad guys? Why don't we stand up to bad guys? Because we're altruistic wimps. We don't want to destabilize the Middle East. If you go after the Houthis, a lot of civilians will die. That's the reality. They like Hamas, are entrenched in the Yemenite civilian population. We can't kill civilians. That's a no-no. Nobody would. The International Court of Justice would get upset. I mean, the world would be upset. They wouldn't like it if we did that. So I mean, it's why doesn't Israel destroy Hamas, or hasn't already? Why don't we allow the Ukrainians to defend themselves? Why haven't we gone after Iran yet? Even though Iran is the source of the Houthis and the source of Hamas, and we're weak morally, not weak militarily. We get to flatten Yemen in just easily, but because of altruism and second-handedness, we won't stand up for ourselves. Thanks, Adam. Sivan. Sivan and then Tom. Oh, sorry, there was no Sivan. Steve. Steve has already asked. Tom. It's confusing.
Yes, Yaron. Question. So what do you think about Estonia's position in terms of our location here in location and size? I mean, it's clear that any relationship between two countries or a country and organization is based on some kind of a mutual usefulness. We have convinced ourselves here in Estonia that NATO is useful to us. I guess in some sense they definitely are, but would you agree that the usefulness of Estonia from a NATO country's perspective is to have a buffer zone between Russia and them? I mean, we are from the Russian border to the sea only 250 kilometers, so we are, if we don't, and we have this policy of no first strike for sure. So after the first strike, there will be no more Estonia if Russia decides to do that.
Yeah, I mean, Estonia is in a terrible place. It's geographically in a terrible place. It's you know, I don't believe in little countries, so I'm not sure they should be in Estonia. But Estonia depends on NATO. There's no question about it, and NATO is good for Estonia. The only reason NATO would defend Estonia is because if it doesn't defend Estonia, then what about Latvia and Lithuania and Poland, and what's next, kind of? So you have to draw a line somewhere, and NATO has drawn the line at the Estonian border, and I think NATO would defend Estonia. And I'm not sure Donald Trump would defend Estonia. I have a feeling Donald Trump would be willing to cut a deal with Putin, take Estonia, and leave whatever. But I do think generally most members of NATO would want to defend Estonia. Again, I'm not sure Trump would. So, and I don't think it's an issue of a buffer, because there is no real buffer, right? Once you take Estonia, the Russians are in the sea. They're not on somebody else's border. It's more the issue of a red line, right? It's more the issue of once Russia is willing to invade Estonia, it's willing to invade Poland, it's willing to invade anywhere, and NATO cannot afford to give Russia the impression that they can get away with that. That's all it really is.
But when we, I don't know if you heard of this. It was yesterday or 2 days ago. Russia came over the Narva River and basically stole some buoys.
Yep.
Like literally stole stole 25 buoys out of 50.
Yep.
And what we had installed there for ships, for ship travel, and all of our officials up to the prime minister, we were they are proud of themselves, and they call it not submitting to Russians' provocation. I mean, I compare this to I see a couple of guys raping my wife, and I stand by there and look at them and say,
Yep.
all right, I'm not submitting to your provocation.
Right.
And then I demand them to wear condoms afterwards. I mean, that's what we do. So
this is Europe. This is America, right? It's the same question as why didn't America wipe out the Houthis, right?
So there is no red lines. There is no red line. So
I agree. That's why I
Estonia is
said,
not a red line. So that's
well,
what I mean.
I think it's becoming I think given how weak our response to Ukraine, I mean, I think in the first few days after Ukraine, when the world kind of rallied around Ukraine, people thought there would be red lines, but there aren't any. And they've already sanctioned Russia all they can sanction Russia. They don't want to, they don't want to call their ambassador and cut off diplomatic relations, which would be the next thing to do, which is what they should do. So they'll take the buoys, they'll shift the international line, they'll challenge the Finns, they'll challenge any border, they'll push, they'll challenge to check where the red line is. There is a red line somewhere. It's just not clear where that red line is, and they'll keep pushing that red line to see.
I'm already imagining that
if tanks cross the Estonian border, that would be a red line.
If tanks cross, we will not shoot at them, and if they just ride their tanks without shooting at us, they will let them ride until Tallinn. I'm telling you this, and that's exactly what's going to happen. I mean, they would really. I have no idea what they would have to do actually to make us react in some way. It's
but that's
crazy.
a West that is committing suicide. That's a West that's given up on itself and it's over, right? And that's
looks this way.
Yep.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Did I miss anybody this round? No, I think I got everybody. Okay, let me do these questions. Mary Aline, what do you listen for in music? Do you pick up particular instruments, harmonies, melodies, structure? What else? Tips for listening and appreciating how to approach a new piece. How about evaluating opera voices? Oh God, I mean, this is difficult. I'd say with music, I look for, well, it really depends. A lot of classical music, and I assume you're talking about classical music because that's the only thing I'm qualified, if that, to talk about. I think with classical music, there are two types. One is the classical music that you can pretty much appreciate on the first listening. Like you get there's something good there. And then what am I looking for in that? A melody, but something interesting. Harmonies that are interesting, an interesting structure, something that is challenge, that piques my interest, and then I will listen more times to kind of delve more into it. The second type is stuff that I just don't get on the first time, but people I respect say, no, this is good. And this is, I don't know, Mahler, right? Mahler's good music, but it's hard. It's certainly hard first time you listen to it. So there, I need to hear it a few times. And I need to train my ear for it in some sense. So what I usually do with music like that is, there's a reason why I think it might be good, but I can't get it from just listening. I play it in the background for a while. And so my ear gets used to it. And then I focus on it again, and I listen to it a few times. That was true when I first started listening to opera, which was very difficult. I would put it on in the background for a while, and then afterwards, I would stop putting it on the background and just focus on it and listen to it in focus. That doesn't work as well with, I'd say, music written today, because I don't have anybody who I can turn to, who I trust to say, no, you should really give this a shot. It's really good. And I don't know that I can, if it's difficult, I don't know that I'm in a position to be able to figure it out. Which reminds me, I'm going to a great concert tonight. We've got Beethoven's Fourth Piano Concerto, which is one of my top 3 piano concertos ever, maybe, I think. Certainly top 5. And Beethoven's Symphony No. 7, which is in the top 5 symphonies of all time. So, I mean, this is going to be a stunning concert. And the pianist for the Beethoven Fourth is a really world-class Russian pianist. So anyway, that's tonight in 3 hours. It's going to be a lot of fun. How do I evaluate opera voices? I have no objective standard for evaluating opera voices. I either like them or I don't like them. I think the main thing about it is the voice being used effectively to convey the emotion that should be conveyed singing this particular aria and given this particular music that's playing. And in terms of listening, I've often said this, classical music deserves your full focus. It's not the kind of music that can be played in the background for full appreciation. It's not the kind of music that you can tune in and out of. To really get it, to really get the most out of it, you have to make it give it your entire focus. And it's hard, particularly in a world of very, very, very short attention spans that we live in. But that's when you're going to get the most emotionally satisfying response, if you will. Alexis, what do you make of Rishi Sunak's desperate triggering of a general election? I don't know. I mean, the only thing I can think of is he has some reason to believe that he would do worse in 6 months than now. But he's going to do terrible now. So maybe he just wants to get it over with. I really don't understand the strategy other than, here's another interpretation. The UK just came out with some good news for the economy. He wants to capitalize on that quickly because he doesn't think it'll last. It's some short-term desperation move that, we'll see. We'll see how it works. All right, we've got a few others. We'll do these quickly. Michael, all these crazy leftist DAs were voted in when Trump took power. If Trump wins, will the left become radical and start letting more people out of jail and allowing Antifa to run wild? In some places, that'll definitely happen. But I think a lot of the reason that the crazies were reined in is because it became too crazy for even their own population. So see Portland now. I don't think that's because of Biden. I think it's just because no matter who the president is, the insanity of a growing crime wave is too much for people to tolerate. Let's see. Liam says, why would such a macho culture like Israel elect a homely socialist woman like Golda Meir? Oh, Golda Meir was maybe homely, but she was tough. She was super macho. She was very tough. She was very strong. She didn't take BS. She said she was, in that sense, she was very masculine. So yeah, I don't know what any of that has to do with anything. And everybody was a socialist in those days in Israel. So it didn't matter. Ben Gurion was a socialist man. So the fact that you were a socialist doesn't make you less or more macho. Yeah, Golda Meir was perfect for the macho culture of Israel. Harper Campbell, Christianity says to love your neighbor. Hedonism says to love pleasure. Utilitarianism says to love your neighbor's pleasure. It's pretty good. Frank, clinically depressed but physically healthy Dutch woman Zoraya Terbeek, 29, just died by euthanasia. This is wrong. She needed treatment, not death. I mean, I don't see why that's any of your business, Frank. She wanted to die. She wanted to die. Why do you get to decide who lives and who dies? All she's asking is for somebody to make it easier for her to die. That's all euthanasia is somebody to make it easier. But you are the one pulling the trigger. You just it's messy to actually take a gun and shoot yourself in the brain. And sometimes people miss, as surprising as that is. They're so nervous. They're so, and then they do themselves brain damage. So, and climbing up a tall building and jumping out, it's difficult. So all she's asking is that professionals be allowed at their own discretion, only if they're willing, to help you commit suicide. I don't see what's wrong with that. And I don't see how you or anybody else has a right to tell somebody, you cannot commit suicide. I'm not allowing it. Oh, you can, but you have to make it messy. We have to make it difficult. I mean, what the hell? Why should it be difficult? Why should it be messy? Who cares if she was in pain or not? She wanted to die. And somebody was willing to help her. So it wasn't murder, because we know she wanted it. So what's the problem? Somebody helped her die. I don't see any issue with that. It's not like the state is putting her to death. It's not like somebody did it against her will. All right, let's see. Paul, I was sickened, not shocked, when I watched the video of St. Louis Girl Scouts teaching girls a song ending with "Free, Free Palestine." Oh, God. Yes, that is really, really sickening. I haven't seen that video. It's not good. It's not good where we are in the world today. Raphael, who are the founders of modern art, and what were their psychological basis? Did they have a desire to destroy the great achievement of past artists? Yes, I mean, it was people like Picasso, Rodin to some extent, and others. And the thing about them was that these were unbelievably talented individuals. They knew how to make great art, right? And they chose to destroy it. So there were people who philosophically wanted destruction, epistemologically wanted to destroy, or to project the destruction of your senses, the destruction of the world around you. So they were primarily nihilists, and then you get the Kandinskys and the Pollocks of the world, but it's not clear that they have any talent, right? The Picassos, the Rodins, they had talent, and they chose to use their talent for the purpose of destruction, of annihilation. Mary Aline, in Paradise Lost, after Adam and Eve ate the fruits of the tree of knowledge, they experienced lust. Before that, sex was beautiful and lust-free. Bizarre. Yes, I mean, actually, in the Old Testament, there is no sex in the Garden of Eden, and it's just companionship. And in the Old Testament, there's no pregnancy and no children. There's just Adam and Eve. They take care of nature. It's completely static. It's pain-free. It's work-free. And it's Rousseau's man in a state of nature. I think Roy Rousseau gets the concept. And
it's knowledge-free too.
What's that?
It's knowledge-free too.
Yeah, of course, knowledge-free, because they haven't eaten the fruit of knowledge. It's actually, if you really dig, it's reason-free. So it's thinking free. And what eating from the fruit of knowledge is, so basically, what the Garden of Eden is man qua animal. No free will, no reason, no thinking, just being like an animal. When they eat from the tree of knowledge, they gain the capacity to reason. It's almost like a metaphor for the evolutionary switch that switched from whatever it was pre-man with no free will to Homo sapien with free will. It's almost like there's some understanding with the writers. I told you these people are smart. Some understanding with the writers of this, that there was a time where before human beings became human beings, that they were just animals. And then something happened and they became human. And that's bizarre it's interesting that they would think that. Sex, immense pleasure, lust, desire, love, all of the emotions that are the product of free will or the product of values Think of it this way. Adam and Eve didn't value. They had nothing to value. Everything was just there. They were like Ayn Rand's indestructible robot. And what happened when they ate from the tree of knowledge is they gained reason, they gained value, and suddenly they had to work, they had to think, they had to pursue knowledge in order to survive. And it's truly an insightful story in that way. It's a good way to illustrate what makes humans special. All right, guys, thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you for those of you who stuck with us and asked questions. Thanks for all of you who asked questions in the super chat. I will see you all on Monday. Not sure exactly when the show is. Not sure exactly what's going to happen Monday because I'm going to be in Miami traveling, but I will. There will be a show on Monday, I hope, and I will see you all there. Bye, everybody.